As always, I want to start with a review of chapter number 9. Very brief review. The previous chapter was an emotional meltdown of the critic, where we see him express his frustration just because he realized the helplessness of mankind, and it was like a shock to him. So, in his frustration, he indicted God of being evil. Now, in response, he said that man should have three major options. Most people will try to escape, but he suggests that they should endure, and he recommends that people should enjoy. So, escape, endure, and enjoy are the three responses of man to the helplessness that he is in. He also says that time and chance happen to everyone. So, one is he says that God is evil. Second is he says that on earth what happens is time and chance, as if God is also taken by surprise. So it's like taking away the glory away from God. So there are two major complaints or two major flags that he puts upon God. However, then when he remembers about death and comes back to his right senses, first he says that why should he be wise? A wise man is not appreciated, though. So what's the use of being wise? But then he settles down still further, cools down. He says wisdom is better than strength and weapons of warfare. And then in the parting word of chapter number 9, he says that but one sin can destroy wisdom's strength and effectiveness. A wise man can make one mistake and spoil everything. So he decides that he doesn't want to be that sinner who destroys everything. He decides that he will be careful. So that is the brief review of chapter number 9. Now we will go into chapter number 10. Now, chapter number 10 is an interesting study. Again, just like all the chapters have been from the beginning of Ecclesiastes, every time I have sat with a chapter, I have kind of thought about how will I work around it, because everything looks like a mess as you read the chapter. But then God has been amazing. He has thrown amazing light on how these verses can be categorized. And I am really amazed at how the whole book has panned out so far. And chapter 10 is equally interesting. In this chapter, we will once again study about wisdom. But this time, the difference is that it will be highlighted by creating a contrast against foolishness. So he is going to draw a dark background of foolishness, and in the foreground, wisdom is going to be highlighted. And the critic interestingly draws 8 different kinds of fools. Not 1, 2, 3, 4, 8. 8 different kinds of fools or foolishness, as we see in this chapter, spread across the various verses. So I want you to note down. If you are not noting down, please pick up a pen and pencil and start noting down. The first kind of a fool is a wise fool. Now we will see him in chapter number 1. A wise fool. Now who is a wise fool? Verse number 1 says, dead flies putrefy the perfumer's ointment and cause it to give off a foul odor. So does a little folly to one respected for wisdom and honor. He continues from where he exactly ended in chapter 9, where he said that one sinner destroys much good. But this time he's saying it in a different way. One fly can spoil the entire perfumer's ointment. Now, he's saying that little or small or seemingly innocent acts of foolishness can mess up the reputation of a wise and honorable man. We might consider them as small things, little things, but these little things can spoil the entire ointment. The perfumer's ointment or a perfume was collected with great pain. The process was not simple, and it took a long time to create it. But if a fly fell into it, it did not just spoil a local area. It did not just create a spot on it or impact it only mildly. The perfume was such that if the fly fell, the the spoil of the fly will spread to the entire ointment. It will not be restricted to a local area so that it can be taken away from there and the rest can be salvaged. So that's not how the ointment is. So he says that one fly can spoil not just a part of the ointment but the entire ointment. And in the same way, a small or little innocent act of foolishness does something similar to the wise man. So, a wise man needs to be very careful about how he deals with his life. Now, we know what happened to Esau when he traded his birthright for a bowl of porridge, lentil porridge or soup. We know what happened to Moses when one small act of hitting against the rock stopped him from entering the promised land. We know how one small mistake of Aaron in questioning the leadership of Moses, whether he is the only one who can lead Israel, what led that into. We know that one small mistake of David from the terrace of getting lustful thoughts about Uriah's wife, what it led into. We also know in the New Testament of what one small lie spoken by Ananias and Sapphira in the New Testament, what it did to them. So, small things have consequences. Little tiffs, small arguments and fights between a husband and wife, if it is happening all the time, it is not good. As a fly, a spoiled fly can putrefy the entire, a dead fly can putrefy the entire ointment, right? Tongue is small, but see how much damage it can cause. The rudder of a ship is small, but it can turn a ship which is so huge. The steering wheels of our vehicles, they are so small compared to the vehicles they are governing. Small things have consequences. I want to tell you about the story of two horses in the Roman Empire. They just stood next to each other, and the measurement of their behinds, their hip sizes, was taken, and it was around, I think it was 5 feet and 8 inches or something. When two horses in the Roman Empire stand together, their behinds, they together measured as 5 feet 8 inches. This measurement was used to design the carriages of the Roman army. And this measurement was used to create ruts on the roads, like railway, like trams, like how trams travel, they travel in the ruts of the road. So such ruts were created wherever the Roman Empire was, so that the army could go in a straight line. So the horses would go in a straight line and they wouldn't go here and there. Which measurement was used? 5 feet 8 inches. Then much later, about 1000 years later, when factories came up and wagons were built, at that time the same ruts were used. The same ruts were used to create carriages for horses, and then carriages for trams, and then finally when steam engine was invented, because the tools were ready, the dies were ready, everything was ready at 5 feet 8 inches measurement. When the railway tracks came across Europe, there were 5 feet 8 inches in distance. Now, when India started building railway tracks, they borrowed it exactly from there, and our railway tracks in the initial days during the British was 5 feet 8 inches. Now, you may look at a railway track and wonder, and I used to wonder why it is such an odd figure, but it was an odd figure because two horses stood together, and when they were measured, they were 5 feet 8 inches. It's a small thing that happened in Rome, but it created a ripple across the world that even today our some of the places, not everywhere, where there are, because there are meter gauges, broad gauges, narrow gauges, so you should know the difference. Now, some places in the world, the measurement is just because two horses stood together and their measurement was 5 feet 8 inches. So small things can have large repercussions. Now, what are the small mistakes that a wise man can make? Now, a wise man can have weaknesses that can cause mistakes. What are his weaknesses? That he has a lack of self control. Anybody can have it, right? Or he's a easygoing guy, he doesn't want to work hard. That could lead to mistakes. He is a procrastinator. He doesn't want to do things now. He says, okay, I'll do it tomorrow. He's indecisive. He's not able to take decisions fast. He's a little self-centered. He's a little insensitive to feeling the needs of people. He gets easily irritable. These are small weaknesses. These are not huge problems, but could create a lot of mistakes in that wise man. There could be strengths that can make him cause mistakes. For example, he is a little firm, but in his firmness, he becomes stubborn. He may be frugal, that means he is careful in spending his money, but he may become a miser. He may be a little liberal, but that could lead to extravagance. He could enjoy a little bit of fun, but he could end up being frivolous. He would be somebody who answers straight to the face. He is not going to hide things, but he can become rude, So, his weaknesses or his strength, either of them can make him commit mistakes which can become like the dead flies that putrefy the entire ointment. Now, when we shift to verse number 2, he adds on that a wise man's heart is at his right hand, but a fool's heart at his left. What does that mean? A wise man's heart is a strength to him, and this is good, and he knows what to do with it. So, heart means both the heart and the mind and the interaction in between. So, it's the reasoning, the logic, the emotions all together. When a wise man deals with his emotions and his strength, it says that it is on his right hand, which means it is strength for him, it is good for him. So his emotions are in place, his inspiration is in place, his willpower is in place, his strength and power is in place, and all of them are well aligned in the right direction. Be it for religious things, secular things, social things, difficult things, or even doubtful cases where decisions cannot be taken fast. But if it's a wise man, he knows how to overcome his weaknesses, how to strengthen his strengths. His heart being in the right place, he is a very dependable man. On the other hand, a fool's heart is his weakness, and it is bad. And wherever he goes, says the Bible, wherever he goes, verse number 3 says, even when a fool walks along the way, he lacks wisdom, and he shows everyone that he is a fool. He cannot hide it. Everybody will come to know that he is a fool. Why? Because his heart is not in the right place. That means his emotions are not in control, his inspirations are not in place, his willpower is not in his control. He doesn't even know what his strength is. And because of all this, he cannot hide who he is, and people will find out very soon what kind of a person he is. So this is a wise fool. A wise fool. We were considering the wise fool now. Let's go to the next one. Now let's look at the next one. It's powerful fool. Verses 4 to 7 reveals this guy. If the spirit of the ruler rises against you, do not leave your post, for conciliation pacifies great offenses. There is an evil I have seen under the sun, as an error proceeding from the ruler. Folly is set in great dignity, while the rich sit in the lowly place. I have seen servants on horses, while princes walk on the ground like servants. Now, there are some fools who are very powerful. Now, the reason for their foolishness may be twofold. Here, the critic tells us that there are two kinds of powerful fools. One is the emotional fool who is powerful. and another is the indecisive fool who is powerful. I'll explain. An emotional fool who is also a powerful fool may be powerful because he is a king, but he shows his foolishness by not controlling his emotions. People in powerful positions who have power and authority can be foolish to abuse this power, and it often shows off as emotional outbursts. The outbursts are unreasonable and they are shown usually towards people who get trapped helplessly. So, people who are powerful and do not rein their emotions, the critic says that fellow is a fool. He is a fool. But then there is another powerful fool he is talking about, and this guy is a fool because he is indecisive. He is powerful, but he is indecisive, and therefore he is a fool. What makes these people this way is mainly the people they choose into positions of power and influence. They do not know the people that they have with them. They have no discernment. They do not know the right people from the wrong. They cannot decide about who is good for them and who is bad for them. So what they do is they seat fools in positions of dignity while rich people sit in lowly places. That's foolishness. They should know who has to sit where. So these are people who really don't know whom to place where in their court or in their ministry or in their business, and they make servants to ride on horses, allowing them comfort and facilities and giving them responsibilities, while princes are stripped of their responsibilities, facilities and comforts and made to feel unimportant and insignificant. This fellow doesn't know how to make decisions, so he is a fool. He is powerful, but he is a fool. David was brought down to be like a servant. He was stripped of his responsibilities, his facilities were taken away, his comforts were removed by his own son Absalom, and he had to run for his life on feet. The critic says that it is very strange that powerful people make such mistakes. But if we look at history, we know why this happens. There are two reasons why powerful people make indecisive foolishness. What I mean to say is they make foolish decisions in their life. Why is it? One is because they don't care that they don't know. They don't know, so they don't care and they depend on other people. One. Number two, people in positions of power want to trust a childhood friend or somebody who studied with them or a relative, or they marry somebody and a relative formed out of marriage, or people who flatter them, or they choose people because they have their own lusts and passions, so they place people in positions of power and positions, and people win their hearts using lies and deceit, and they don't know how to differentiate between what and what is not. A person may be a good childhood friend, but he may not be right for a certain position, but they cannot make out the difference. So there is a fool like that. There is a fool like that. Now, why are we studying all this? Is because sometimes we may feel that we are not fools, we are wise. But here is Solomon exposing in little areas how foolishness shows forth. So I want you to consider, when we are talking about all these fools, I want you to consider whether you are one of them. So far we considered what? We considered a wise fool. A wise fool is somebody who is actually wise, but he is making mistakes, small mistakes. And that small mistake, because it is persisting and because it is one of his weaknesses, or because it is one of his strengths that is making him making it a mistake, for all these reasons he's becoming a fool. On the other side, we considered the powerful fool. Now, I want you to think whether you are somebody, whether you are in power or not, if you are somebody who has emotional outbursts and you intimidate people, you're a fool. You are somebody who doesn't understand between people who is good and bad, or who is not favorable for you, or who is not good to be long company, and or if you are in a position of power where you can appoint people somewhere, you are indecisive, you are a fool. So that is how I want you to look at it, and not just as an intellectual exercise. The third kind of fool is a wicked fool. Now, this fellow comes up in verses 8 and 9. We'll see that he says, "He who digs a pit will fall into it, and whoever breaks through a wall will be bitten by a serpent. He who quarries stone may be hurt by them, and he who splits wood may be endangered by it." Now, here, the critic is bringing out wickedness, but two kinds of wickedness. So, the third kind of fool is a wicked fool. Wise fool, powerful fool, wicked fool. Two kinds of wickedness. One is intentionally wicked, other fellow is casually wicked. First, we'll look at intentionally wicked. Such a person digs a pit to intentionally harm another fellow, but he falls into that same pit. Okay, that's how things are built into it. For example, Haman, in the story of Esther, you will see Haman, who made the gallows to hang Mordecai, but Haman himself hung on it. So there was a pit that he dug. He was intentionally wicked. He was doing it so that he could trap Mordecai. But that intentionality turned out to be a trap for him. Now, similar things are said later on, where we read about the quarry, that there are such people who remove stones from walls or buildings, or even remove boundary stones. Earlier times, fields were marked by boundary stones. So there are people who move boundary stones, remove stones from houses so that that house becomes weak, or create holes in the walls by removing stones. These are all intentionally wicked people. They will see their consequence. There are people who remove trees from other people's fields. It could be for firewood, it could be for use in their house, it could be for sale. I'm from Kerala and I know a lot of this that happens. My dad lives in an area where there are a lot of cousins of his around him. It's so strange and sad that some of our cousins get into our fields and cut down. For example, there is a teak tree or a sesame tree. What's a sesame is blackwood or redwood, and they would, because that is a very costly wood. When dad was not around, they come cut the tree and they sold it. It is illegal, but they did it. So these kind of things do happen, but it is wickedness, says the critic. And these intentional wicked people, they will fall into their own pits. Now, another verse we read there was, that he who breaks through a wall will be bitten by a serpent. Now, that's where I want to talk about the second kind of wicked people. Though intentionality could be there, but there are some fences that are broken casually. Okay, I'll come into that. Some people are casually wicked because they have respect of, actually they have no respect of what is the right of others, and therefore they carelessly and casually do wicked things without worrying about the consequences. This is talked about in terms of walls or fences, and the consequence is that they will be bitten by a serpent. Now, fences or walls depict boundaries that are created between people for the sake of protection of everyone, for the sake of predictability, for the sake of social order. There are boundaries and fences. Even yesterday when I was talking in the English sermon, I mentioned about the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments is a rule set up as a boundary, what you can do and what you cannot do. We do not like to be fenced and walled, but life is about moving through these walls. You have to maintain the boundaries and walk through it. Just like you expect others to not infringe into your personal space and boundaries, you have to do the same for others. For example, we have fences of shame that we need to honor inside relationships. That if you cross a certain line, then it is shame. It protects our dignity and of the other person, right? We have fences of respect that we have inside a relationship, a mutual respect. So when two people are having a relationship, there should be a minimum respect that people should have for each other, else the relationship does not stand. Then we have fences of standard codes of conduct in workplaces, in homes, in churches, in marketplaces, in common gatherings. These are unwritten rules, but they are like boundaries. By this is the time of coming, this is the time of lunch, this is the time of going, these are the things you expected to do, this is how you need to talk to your colleagues, this is how you can talk to your superiors. They are written and unwritten boundaries inside that place, even in the marketplace. So these are social boundaries and we need to respect it. But the casually wicked people, they don't care for these boundaries. So they think that it is a curb on freedom. Man, it's freedom. So I can do anything. So they just get onto any wall and fence and they just crisscross. They trespass. The result is wickedness. A child, when he is small, has to be told which fence he should not climb. An old man has to be told which were the fences he shouldn't have. Between these two shouldn't haves, should not and shouldn't have, are all the decisions made. And actually, we come from one fence which we started seeing as a child to the last fence we'll see as a dying man, and there are fences all in between. You cannot trespass it. When you do it, it's a wickedness. The result of such wickedness is serpent's bite. It could be immediate a health issue, lack of peace of mind, losing the peace of mind. It could impact your relationships. It could create paralyzing fear inside of you. It could lead to shame. It could be a hit on your confidence. It could lead to morbidity. It could lead to any of these consequences. But if you commit wickedness, there is immediate consequence, is what the critic is saying. So we looked at the wise fool, then we looked at the powerful fool, then we looked at the wicked fool. Let's look at the others. Now there is a mindless fool. He comes up in verse number 10. If the axe is dull and one does not sharpen the edge, then he must use more strength, but wisdom brings success. There are guys who use blunt axes to get their work done. They do not sharpen their axes. What does sharpening of the axes mean? It means three things: skill up, tool up, rule up. I repeat, skill up, tool up, rule up. I'll tell you what. Skill up means you need to add skills to yourself. That is sharpening of your axe. Be it profession, be it whatever you do. If you do not have the skills, you should add it. You should take education, be it music, be it sports, be it studies. Go to the right place and skill up. Move with the right kind of people, but skill up. Learn techniques from the practical fields, but skill up. Get a trainer, personal trainer who can help you, but skill up. If you don't skill up, your axe is not sharp, it is blunt. And what will happen? You will have to use more strength, and you get tired, and you have body pain, and you have no motivation to come back because there is no progress in the work you are doing. Skill up. Those who don't understand this and keep hitting the axe hard without skilling up and then say, oh, whatever I do, there is no success in it, he's a mindless fool. Are you doing that in your workplaces? Are you doing that with your life? Skill up. Second is tool up. Now, you may have all the skill, but if you don't have the tools, if you don't have the actual tools, if you don't have the instruments, if you don't have the equipment, you have gone to a class and got trained for the guitar, but you don't have a guitar at home. You are an engineer, but you don't have the basic tools that kind of an engineer needs. or should have. You are a salesman, but you are not getting skilled up in the modern practices in trade, new developments. You don't have the tools for it. Then you're a mindless fool. Third thing is you need to rule up. Now, what is rule up? Rule up means your rules, your principles should be upward looking, forward looking. It should be in the right place. You need to have a good worldview in place. Now, thankfully for us, we follow the Bible, which is an excellent worldview. Wherever the Bible went, arts, sciences, knowledge, they only increased. Look at places where the worldview was retrograde. If you follow a worldview which is retrograde, it will push you backwards. It will not help you. It will only take you back to the Stone Age, And we could partly see that in our country. But if you follow the truth, it will not only just give you the right worldview, but it will also give you moral and ethical principles which are right, which you will need to sharpen your reflexes. So you need to skill up, you need to tool up, you need to rule up. That's when your axes are sharpened and are actually going to work for you, bring you success. Wisdom brings you success. The next kind of fools are talkative fools. Now, these are mentioned in verses 11 to 15. Now, let's read about them. A serpent may bite when it is not charmed. The babbler is not different. The words of a wise man's mouth are gracious, but the lips of a fool shall swallow him up. The words of his mouth begin with foolishness, and the end of his talk is raving madness. A fool also multiplies words. No man knows what is to be. Who can tell him what will be after him? The labor of fools wearies them, for they do not even know how to go to the city. Now, interesting. Some people talk so much that all the subject matter they talk is like a snake that might bite any time. That means when they talk, they throw snakes around in their chatter, which can bite them or others. And these are wild snakes, not charmed snakes. Charmed snakes, you catch them, you remove the poison from them, and then even if they bite, it's just causing a physical injury. But wild snakes, when they bite, they cause casualties. So people who do not have control on their talk and keep on going yap, 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 we're talking about those people who talk too much actually do it for their own harm. A wise man provides grace when he moves around, but a fool damages himself and others by what he blabbers. So he keeps chattering and talking mindlessly without regard of who, where, what, when, how, etc. And he does so with great confidence. So when he is chattering, he is boasting as if he knows what's going to happen tomorrow. But does anybody know what's going to happen tomorrow? So he boasts as if he knows everything about tomorrow. He knows कि क्या होगा आगे मुझे पता है. That's foolishness. And Solomon here says that everyone gets tired of him because of his constant chatter. But it could also mean that that line in verse number 15, the labor of fools wearies them. It also means that these guys, they get tired when they have to work. They never get tired of talking, but you give them some work, they get very tired. So the only muscle that is developed in their whole body is between their 32 dentures. The rest of the body is weak. But the problem with these guys is they only know how to talk. The irony is that they don't know simple things. So they will talk about two difficult things, but if you give them a simple practical thing to solve, they don't know. They don't know the way around it. They don't know how to handle or deal with the things that they get their hands into. They don't know how to go about in a public place. They don't know simple things. They only talk big things, and they can fall apart very fast. So this is a fifth kind of a fool, a talkative fool. Now there is another fool mentioned in verse number 16 and 17. Woe to you, O land, when your king is a child and your princes feast in the morning. Blessed are you, O land, when your king is the son of nobles and your princes feast at the proper time for strength and not for drunkenness. Now, some countries may have a young man who becomes a king at a very small age. So, at a very small age, he's become too powerful, has lots of riches in his hands, he has a lot of authority in his hands, he has a lot of time in his hands, and with all that, he gets a lot of friends around him, and then he doesn't know what to do. So, what he does is he throws feasts and gets drunk in the daytime and has fun because he doesn't know what to do, because he's young to administer the country, young to know the big problems of the marketplace. So he spends his money in feasts and banquets, and then he does that at the cost of administration, at the cost of law and order, at the cost of the economy of his kingdom. And that's why the critic says, woe to such a place which has an inexperienced fool sitting at the helm. And when such a person sits as a king who is drunk the whole day, wickedness will prosper. King Herod, the tetrarch, before whom Jesus was brought, he was a maniac like that. No, he was a king. So he got the taxes, but he didn't have to rule the country because Romans ruled the country. So what will a king do whole day? So he used to hold parties. In one of those parties is where John the Baptist was beheaded. So whole day he would be drunk. What happened? Wickedness prospered under his nose and he couldn't do anything about it. So wickedness will also prosper when the king remains drunk. But the critic says a ruler who is noble. So noble means not just character, noble in his education, noble in his birth, noble in his life, noble in his actions. Such a person is good for the land. He eats only when it is the time to eat, not just for getting drunk or partying. He knows it's time to eat and therefore he eats. He does that because he knows his strength is derived from there. In the ancient kingdoms, though the king's banquet was huge, a portion was always allocated to the king because they demanded that the king should be fit for battle, he should be healthy, he should be strong. So they were taken too much care of. Just look at our Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He has a whole range of doctors who travel with him, and they decide his diet, what he eats for breakfast, what he eats for lunch, what he eats for dinner, what time he eats and how much he eats, and what are the other things he'll need as supplements so that he can function not just physically efficiently but even mentally efficiently. But when you have an inexperienced fellow sitting in that place with a lot of power, authority and money, he doesn't know what to do with it, so he messes it up. Now, are you considering yourself also right now in the middle of all this? Are you making foolish decisions because of your inexperience? Think about it. The next kind of a fool is a lazy fool. You can find him in verse number 18. Because of laziness, the building decays, and through idleness of hands, the house leaks. See, when a building is constructed or taken for repairs, there are a lot of activities in the construction work which is actually very laborious. The word labor is like a woman going into labor, it's laborious. It's hard work. When you see a building come up, this fellow will go up, go down. We want the wall to come up straight, but if you actually wait there and see the wall come up, it is very frustrating because he goes brick by brick, then he looks at the level, then he'll remove one brick and see the level. So there is line dori, there is plumb line. Oh, there are so many things that go into it. So it's hard work. Just by watching, we can get bored. To imagine the fellow is working. He needs to be patient, he needs to be consistent, he needs to be persistent. And sometimes he has to take the entire thing down and build it up all again so that the wall is good, the structure is good. All these needs patience, perseverance and intense labor. But imagine if that fellow, that mason or that engineer is a lazy guy, what will happen? He will compromise on the work that happens. And then you will end up making a building which will see its roof sinking or ceiling leaking or the house dilapidating. A person who engages in a big project but is lazy while he is working at it is a lazy fool. The same principle applies to other building projects like family. Family is a building project. It's hard work. Lazy people cannot build good families. Church. Church is a building, not the building of brick and mortar, it's a building of people. And a lazy fellow will build a lousy church. Only a hard-working fellow will be able to build a church. He will be persistent, he will be consistent, he'll go into labor, it will be painful for him. Institutions, even nations, these are all building projects and they need hard-working people. Lazy people mess it up. They are fools. The eighth kind of a fool can be seen in verse number 19. A feast is made for laughter, a wine makes merry, but money answers everything. Now this fellow is a rich fool. He has a lot of money in his hand, but he is fool. A rich man, what he does, he has so much money, he doesn't have to worry about his future. He knows there is enough. So what he does, he starts entertaining guests over food, gives them lavish spread of wine, and he might even forget that it all happens at a cost. It is because he has money, he is able to do it. He should remember that his money will deplete and pretty soon he will have to go out to bring more money. Now this fellow, if he is a king, what he'll do? He'll raise taxes to recover the depletion of funds. He will somehow get money back. So what he will do? He'll perpetrate evil to make sure that he has enough funds with him. If he is a businessman, he will replenish his funds by hook or crook. So first he has a lot of money, doesn't know what to do with it. He then hold parties, then the money gets over and then he does anything to get the money back. He's a rich man, but he's a fool. And he might engage in evil things just to get the money back. But however, if he spends wisely for good things and for the bad times, will it not serve him well? The critic says money answers all things. That means it's one big solution for most problems of life on the earth. And so it should be used well. Some people can be rich, they may have a lot of money with them. Every month, you may have a lot of money which is dispensable. If you have a gross income of 1 lakh and if your total expenses can be covered within 30,000, but yet if you are spending on yourself 60, 70, 80,000, you fall into this category because just because you have money, you are doing it. Because there are so many people who don't have that money and they would have done anything to get that money which is there in your hand. But because you have money, you are entertaining guests over food or giving them lavish spreads of wine. Now, I don't want to put hospitality in the bad light there. Many of us are not calling guests. We are only eating all the food. We are only drinking all the wine. This foolishness, and then it's depleted. So when the bad times come, no money. We have not invested in the good things in life. We have spent that money in eating and drinking. That is foolishness. That is foolishness. So that is the eighth kind of a fool. Now remember, I at the beginning said that there are 8 kinds of fools. But I made a mistake in counting. You can call it foolishness. You can call it carelessness. The last fool is a careless fool. So I might be one of them. And this fellow comes up in verse number 20. And he is also coming to you through this voice note. But there is something about this guy in verse 20 quite interesting. Do not curse the king even in your thought. Do not curse the rich even in your bedroom. For a bird of the air may carry your voice, and a bird in flight may tell the matter. There are some people who speak carelessly about rich people and powerful people. This is foolishness. Now, I would add to that, you should not speak ill about anybody. Now, what's the logic there? if you look at that verse again, it says that even in your thought, do not curse the king. Even in your bedroom, do not curse the rich. For a bird of the air may carry your voice, and a bird in flight may tell the matter. The critic says if you are thinking bad for the king, you're not even speaking, you're just thinking. It might show in your attitude. Or when you are alone, you might just speak it out. Or you might just hint it out on your Twitter or Facebook. And someone might hear it, someone might take it to the king, and it will not be well with you. You may end up as a fool just because you thought evil. But then, just because God has placed him there, if he is not doing anything against the will of God, we have no right to think wicked for him. We have to pray for our authorities, for our kings. It is careless foolishness. Careless foolishness. Now, if you think bad for a rich guy, some powerful guy, this time you are not thinking, but you're talking about it in your bedroom, in your bedchamber. The critic says, hey, careful, some bird may. Which bird? It could be a servant. It could be the next door neighbor. We live in cities, in flats, and we don't even realize where the voice is going. It may be a child in your house sitting there and listening, and he doesn't know what to do with that information, and he may just blabber it out in front of the person you're talking about. Or someone close to you right now may change their position later, put it across in a very different way, that you will be at a disadvantage. And sometimes when you talk like this, children don't understand. So they will behave in strange ways about the people you have talked about in your bedroom. I have found out so many things that parents have, father and mother have talked about me in their houses, because children came and said that, you know what dad and mommy said. So talking like that is foolishness. And there is no need for us to gossip and backbite. Be careful when you do that. You never know what is it that you will talk and how it will come back to bite you. So I talked about 9 different kinds of fools, right? The first fool was a wise fool. The second fool was a powerful fool. The third was a wicked fool. The fourth was a mindless fool. The fifth was a talkative fool. The sixth was an inexperienced fool. The seventh was a lazy fool. The eighth was a rich fool. And the ninth was a careless fool. We are considering these fools not just to find out who is who. It is just to look at our own lives. Don't look around and think about people. That fellow is a careless fool. That fellow is a wise fool. That fellow is a rich fool. Don't implicate people. This is just for introspection, about analyzing yourselves in the light of this word. And as the critic got so serious about that one sin that he was committing, where he got frustrated and called God evil, and now suddenly he realizes that he may be wise, but still he can be foolish. And there can be so many different areas in which foolishness can still continue to show in and through our lives. So we need to trust in God. We may have all the wisdom, but Jesus said, it's good that I go, because I'll send you the Holy Spirit and He will lead you in all truth. So our wisdom may fail us, but the Holy Spirit will not, because He's God and He'll tell us what is right and what is wrong. So we have the aid of our conscience, we have the aid of our wisdom, but we also have aid of the Holy Spirit. Let us aspire for this. So that's it, chapter number 10. I've come to the end of it. May God bless you. We'll see you again soon.